Hey, Carol. Welcome to the main stage here at the Boston Marathon Expo. We're,
Thank you. I'm excited to talk to you.
and we're excited to have you. We'll give you a little introduction, even though you probably don't need much of one. Two-time Olympian and the 2007 World Championships silver medalist at 10,000 meters. And you have become quite the activist in the fight against doping and the fight for the contract rights of pro athletes who become pregnant during their careers. And over the past year, you've transitioned your own career from marathoning into ultras and trail running. So I'll be here to talk. Well, you got to start somewhere, right? So I'll be eager to hear a little more about that later as well. But first, your son Colt turns 10 next month, right?
Yes, he does.
How did that happen?
I don't know. It's wild. Like, we're actually doing a little pool gathering this weekend for him because with COVID and with school starting, even though it's at home, we don't know what people are going to be up to. So he's actually celebrating a month early with a few friends at the pool this weekend. But it's just, I'm like, how did we get here? I can't believe I have a 10-year-old or an almost 10-year-old. It's wild.
I'm sure most of the racing world can't believe it either. Now, when you were a child, you took part in a bunch of sports, a really wide variety of sports, and as I recall, dance as well. Is your son doing the same thing?
Yeah, he sort of does a lot of stuff. He likes to do climbing, he likes to play soccer, he likes to play basketball. He did do a little track program at his school last year, or not last year, he hoped to last year, but it was canceled. So he's kind of all over the place, but he is really into music. That is his favorite thing. He's plays the piano and the drums, and he's really into that. So that's like his favorite thing. But then he plays a whole bunch of sports as well.
Now, do you encourage that sort of diversifying in the sports rather than focusing on any particular one?
Oh yeah, and it's a battle. Even with a child that's only 9 to still have him do multiple sports right now, it's the world has really changed into specialization early. But my husband Adam and I are very firm that we didn't specialize in running until we went to college, and so there's no point, like how do you know what you're good at if you don't try things? And when I was growing up, I did like you name it, I tried it. Like I tried speed skating, I played tennis, I played softball, I played soccer all the way until I graduated from high school. I danced a lot. Um, I tried swimming, I mean, everything. And that's how I realized like what my gifts were. But it's important to learn. Like I love that I can watch any sport and I can appreciate it. I know the rules of the game. I can follow it, but I also can appreciate the skill level it takes to participate in it. And so that's something that we think is really important for Colt as well, to just be really diverse. And then when he, is 17, 18, 19, and he finds something that he knows that's his thing, that's one thing. But until then, he's going to do all sorts of stuff.
Does he enjoy running? Does he run with the two of you at all?
He's funny about running. So like we like to walk the dog at night, and he likes to run during that time. He did do a little track program when he was in second grade, and I wanted to volunteer coach, and he told me no. And he ended up loving it. So it's really funny. It's like it has to be on his terms. We talked to Billy Mills a few months ago when he was still in school, and then we watched his movie, and then that motivated him. He ran a mile every week for like 5 weeks in a row. So, but it definitely has to be on his terms.
Well, I think that's probably okay at the age of 9, almost 10, huh?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And to be expected. So you mentioned a sort of early pool party. What has life been like for the Goucher family during COVID-19?
We've really just spent a lot of time together. We sort of potted up with one other family that has a child Colt's age early on. And so I feel like I have a daughter because she's over here so much, but it's really, that's been it. And then we went to Minnesota for 3 weeks, which was amazing just for a change of scenery. We stayed at my mom's and got to see cousins and stuff, but it's been a lot of time together, which has been at times, we're ready for someone else, but it's also been good. I mean, this is like time that we normally wouldn't have had together. So a lot of swimming, a lot of biking, a lot of walking the dog, and just being together.
I think that's there aren't many benefits to this particular time, but that may be one of them, that you really relate to one another in a new kind of way, a new real steady basis of attending to one another.
Yeah, I mean, I've loved having Adam home, and even with the home learning, you know, I worry sometimes that I'm not doing Colt justice, but I never knew how he really learned before. He has some unique learning challenges, and now instead of someone else having to sit there with him, I'm learning how he operates and I'm learning how his brain works. And so, you know, of course, we'd love to just like go to a restaurant and send him back to school, but there have been some things from this that I think we will remember fondly.
Great.
Yeah.
Now, when this year started, you were just coming off your first ultra and your first trail marathon. What was that like?
It was fun. The trail marathon was not fun. I mean, like, I really loved the community so much in Leadville. The race director and just like the whole vibe of the event was amazing. But the race itself was totally painful. I totally underestimated, you know, racing at 10 to 13,000 feet and what that would feel like. It was just terrible. But then I trained for the North Face 50K, and I was much more realistic with my expectations, and I had accepted that it's okay to walk, you know, when you're climbing 7,000 feet in a race or whatever it is. So I enjoyed that a lot, the 50K, and I went in with no expectation. I didn't try to like keep up with anyone. I did my own thing, and I really, really enjoyed that. So then I was thinking, well, maybe I could. So that race is a little long. It was 33 miles. So then I was thinking, well, could I go 50 miles? So that's kind of where my head was at the beginning of the year. But honestly, with COVID, I'm just running like 50 to 60 miles a week, and I'm not really training for anything.
What is that transition like between a marathon where you're sort of very zoned in on trying to hit certain paces and do certain things that you've done for the last, 10 years, to something so different where you're on trails, you're at ridiculous altitude. There's no such thing as an even pace because the terrain is dictating your pace. What's that like?
You know, it was really hard at first. I'm not going to lie, because I had come off of training for the Houston Marathon in 2019. And so I was in this whole, 540 to 545 pace training situation. And then, but you can't do that up a mountain. You can't do that on a technical trail. But for me, I mean, I've done organized running since I was 12. And so for me, it's been almost 30 years of like looking at my watch and like judging myself by my watch. It's like, did I have a good day or a bad day? Did I hit my splits or didn't I?
Right.
So it was actually hard at first because people would offer to take me running. We'd be running for 3 hours and we would only go like 15 miles, and I'd be like, what is happening? So it was really challenging. But once I finally accepted, like, this is a different sport. You can't worry about pace. That like there is no such thing as pace. It's just always effort. But it really wasn't until I was training for the 50K that I finally got that through my head, because it's like rewiring my brain in the way it's worked for 30 years. So.
Right.
Yeah.
Is that brain rewired now to think of itself as belonging to an ultramarathoner going forward?
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't think I was put on this earth to run ultra marathons. I'm definitely not technical ones. I'm not a good technical runner, but it's something I really enjoyed. And it's kind of like when I first ran the marathon, I realized I had so much strength than I thought. And running that 50K, it was sort of that thing again. And then you start to think, like, well, could I go further? Could I go longer? And so I am intrigued with doing a 50 miler or like a long stage race where you race every day. But I don't think that I'm not going to be like the next great big star. It's really just for myself and to continue. There's so many avenues in running, and to just keep continuing to explore all these other avenues.
Now you mentioned running Houston, and when you ran Houston, you weren't able to finish. You had a hamstring injury. What were you hoping for that day? What were you hoping that race might lead to?
I knew I wasn't going to run the Olympic trials in 2020. I just wanted it for myself, really more than anything. I think the 2016 trials were really difficult to end in fourth place. And then I had 2 years of injury. And so I just was, still being coached by Mark and Heather at the time. And I said, I just want to run a marathon. I want to run a marathon under 240. And they were like, well, we got to, if you're going to run 220 something, we need to start on this month. And I was like, no, 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 no. I'm not doing that. I'm thinking like 235 to 240, and I want to do it on my own terms. And so that's what we did. And I think when I dropped out, I was on like 237 pace, but we were coming to the downhill portion. And that was really disappointing because I wasn't trying to qualify for anything. I wasn't trying to do anything for anyone but myself. And that was a really tough pill to swallow because it was really just for me. And so it was really difficult, but I mean, I couldn't walk. So it was like, obvious, it just needed to be done. But I really enjoyed that buildup. I had been injured for 2 years, and to be able to do a full marathon buildup like that, and then to be able to go and do another marathon in June and then another ultra marathon in November, it just was a great year for me as far as like releasing old expectations and staying healthy and just enjoying the sport.
Mm-hmm. Looking at your 3 Bostons, for one thing, I was surprised when I did a quick scan of your career that you run Boston more often than you run any other marathon.
Yeah, it's my favorite.
What makes it your favorite?
The intimacy of it. My first marathon, I ran New York, and I loved that experience. And I really remember having feelings during the race of like, this is what I was supposed to do. But you're running by tall buildings, you're barely getting any sunlight, it's windy, it's on concrete. When I went to Boston to train for the first time I ran there, running through the neighborhoods and with all the tall trees, and it just reminded me honestly of where I grew up and the neighborhoods I ran through growing up. So there was something so comforting about it. And then the community around it, it's not like anything else. Like the people, it's a part of their every year, they're out there cheering on Marathon Monday, and the community really knows it, and they know the history of it, and just everything down to the hotel staff. I remember the second time I ran, I had to call for a crib for my son, and they brought it up, and the guy was like, "This is your race, Kara. We got you." Just like the knowledge of the community. So I just loved it so much, and I still do. And the course is just so beautiful. I love it.
Well, the first year you ran here in 2009, you came in saying you wanted to win, and you almost did. Can you sort of talk us through that race a little?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the more painful races to remember for me. I was so determined to win, and my coach and I had come up with a race plan, but it really didn't allow for any flexibility. And so we assumed it would be a fast race, and we assumed that I would suck in, and then we assumed that I would, like the last thing my coach said to me was, I do not want to see you in the lead until you turn onto Boylston Street. But if you remember, as the race went on, it was very slow.
Very slow.
The lead pack was huge. And as we went up the Newton Hills, I started to have these thoughts of like, I should just go right now. Like, I feel like I need to go. And then when we crested the top, I just couldn't take it anymore, and I went. But in my head was my coach's words. And then someone from the press truck was like, "Kara, you're running close to 5-minute pace, be careful." And so then I put on the brakes. And so it's hard for me to remember that race because I did love it, but I don't really feel like I listened to my gut. And I don't know if the end result would have been any different had I just gone for it with 10K to go, but at least I wouldn't wonder about it anymore. Like it's 12 years later or 11 years later, and I still wonder like, well, what would have happened? Like maybe I would have got, maybe I would have finished further back because I would have blown up, but maybe I would have been able to pull it off. So I loved that race, but it was just really hard. And it was the first time that it's funny looking back because I felt like the community was excited, but my own personal team wasn't very excited. And I was let know that I had let them down. And so it was a difficult thing for me. And I know I'm like kind of laughing right now, but I actually had to go through therapy to move on from that.
Well, you were in the pack of 3 final three women making the turn onto Hereford, if I recall. What were
Yeah,
you thinking right then?
I was there, but my legs were tired. I actually remember physically looking down at my legs being like, what are you doing? Like, it's go time now.
Where did you go?
And, I never gave up. Even down the stretch, I like moved to the outside because, sometimes at the end of the marathon, people just blow up. And I thought maybe if I move out here, they'll think I've dropped off when I'm still here. But they just powered down and they were what a close finish that ended up being.
The closest in history at the time. Yeah, 1 second.
Close. And, it was what it was. Like they played their cards better but I just was really overwhelmed. I mean, that's like the first time I'm just an emotive person. I cry a lot and I'm expressive, but I've always like really buttoned it in at races. And that was the first time I just started crying right at the finish line, and I just couldn't control it. And I just felt like I had let everybody down. Like I felt like everyone really believed in me and I had let them down.
Yeah. I have heard that from athletes before, and I wonder how many people really understand that mindset of an athlete, that they truly do worry and take to heart the fact that they think they've let people down, even though the people around you don't really think that. But
yeah,
you think they think that.
Years away from it has given me more perspective, and but in the moment and for years after, that's how I felt. Like this community had really rallied behind me, and I really believed I could do this. And I made some technical flaws in the race, and so I just felt really bad about it, that I had gotten everyone's hopes up and all this stuff, and then I didn't deliver. But of course, now with hindsight, I'm like, well, I actually ran as hard as I could, and it was pretty good.
Well, yeah, it was the first time in, I believe, since 1993 that an American woman had finished in the top three in this race. Yeah. And so by most people's measures, that's pretty good.
Yeah. It's funny because you just look at things differently. And of course, now I feel like our American women and our American men even go to Boston more often with pride. And so we're seeing those top finishes more often. But we definitely had a long period of time where we hadn't had that.
Right. Well, you were truly the breakthrough American athlete when it comes to that. First your world championship medal at 10,000 meters. You were there was 2007. That was the first you were the first American male or female to win a medal at 10,000 meters. Then you went to New York and made your marathon debut in 2008. It was the fastest debut there ever, but it was the first American woman to finish in the top three there, I think, since 1994. Then you did the same in Boston, the first American woman. You were really the breakthrough American athlete that has led to a lot of what you just mentioned is happening today.
Well, I appreciate that. I really appreciate that. I never got that big win, but I do feel a sense of pride that I think there are a lot of women that saw me and they were like, if she can do that, I can do that. And we've really just built on that. Now we have people winning New York, winning Boston, winning more medals. Every single championship we're winning medals, and we're in the hunt at the majors. So I feel proud to have been a little part of that kickstart to where American running is now.
Mm-hmm. So then you came back to Boston in 2011, and where 2009 was the slow year, 2011 was the crazy fast year. And what sort of expectations did you come in with to that race, and how did that play out?
Yeah, I wanted to come and compete well. I was in a personal, really stressful situation where I wasn't getting paid by my sponsor. I had a 6.5-month-old. I was sleep deprived. I had a lot going on behind the scenes at that time. I wanted to come back. I was the one that made the choice to race there. I loved Boston. I wanted that to be my first big race back. The workouts had been coming along, but I didn't know, have I had enough time? My son was only 6.5 months old. So, but I was hopeful. I was hopeful, hey, I know this course really well, and I'm a strong athlete, and I trained throughout my whole pregnancy, and now my legs are really strong because they can run even when they're 100, when they're carrying around 160 pounds. So I was hopeful, but it was just so fast, and I didn't have that. And I think Kim Smith went off at first, and she kind of was off by herself. And I remember thinking, like, are we just gonna let her like run away with it? But then we eventually reeled her back in. She actually ended up tearing her calf, I think.
Yeah.
But we reeled her back in, and then it was kind of like a big pack, and then it started to break up. And it was kind of funny. Desi was behind me, when the pack started to break up. And I just started to realize, like, yeah, I actually can't do that. So I'm going to try to maintain where I am right now. And then I can't remember when she passed me, Desi, but she just went rolling by me. I mean, she was like, head up, Kara, keep going. And then she was just gone. And so then I was just really trying to pick off people who were suffering. And honestly, like the whole run in, I think I was fifth. I caught a couple people in the last couple miles.
You were fifth, yeah.
Just like, wanted to know if Desi won. I think that's the first thing I asked when I
really?
Yeah, I was like, did Desi win? Same with 2 years later, the first thing I asked was, did Shalane win? So, I mean, like, again, it's one of those things. At the time, I was a little disappointed. I was going through a situation with my sponsor where I think a win would have like alleviated a lot of stress in my life. But I had a 6.5-month-old baby, and even though I had run throughout my pregnancy, I was pregnant, I wasn't training. So I ran 2:24:50 something, 52 maybe. And so it was pretty good. Yeah. I mean, like, it wasn't on the podium, and it certainly wasn't a win, but it was a really great, solid effort.
I heard you on a recent podcast, and you were interviewing Liz McColgan, and you were incredulous at some of the things she did in the months after she gave birth.
I couldn't believe it. I mean, I started running a week after I gave birth, which was ridiculous. And I would never recommend that to anyone. I mean, like, I felt like my body was going to fall out. And then, I slowly got into like more, I started attending practice 2 weeks after my son was born, which was way too soon. But anyway, I know how hard it was for me. It was so hard. It was so hard on my body, and I was trying to nurse during that time. And, you're not sleeping, you're training so hard, you're just like, you have like new mom brain. And one of the things she did, I can't believe it. I can't believe that she stayed healthy. It's so impressive. And so I have to laugh when people are like, what, you ran 2:24 less than 7 months after giving birth? I'm like, talk to Liz McColgan, because she puts it all to shame.
Yeah, she was winning championships in the year after.
At World Cross within months.
Which is truly, your incredulity was justified. I had forgotten it as well until I was reminded on that podcast. Then you came back in 2013. That was your last Boston, at least until you run it again as a civilian at some point, I hope.
I want to, yeah. 2013 I'm really proud of that race. It's not as like showy. I was never in the lead. But I had an injury after the Olympic Games in 2012, a foot injury. So I started training for that race late, and then I tore my hamstring about 4 weeks out. And I couldn't run for about a week, and then I lost another week of training, and then we only had 2 weeks to go. Mm-hmm. And so I almost pulled out, actually. And my coach at the time, Jerry, was like, I think maybe we should just like not do this. Focus on something else. But my hamstring started to feel better, and I was like, I just want to do it. I love that race. I know it'll kickstart me for like a good track season. And so I ended up running, like, it was a really good field. I think Rita Jeptu won that year. Shalane was in that year. Obviously, we were training together. And so I finished sixth, and I can't remember what my time was, but I think it was pretty solid. And I was like really proud of that performance. And then, of course, that was also the year that the bombs went off. So it sort of shifted from like, okay, I'm still here. I'm still a good athlete. I'm excited what I can do now when I finally get healthy, to, like questioning everything about life and running. But the performance itself, I was actually really proud of that on that day.
Where were you when the bombs went off?
I was back at the hotel. I had a massage planned. And so my mom and my aunt, my sister, and my son had gone and gotten sandwiches for everybody. So they had just come back to the room and we were opening up the sandwiches. And I immediately panicked. Like I just felt like something was wrong. And my mom was really calm. And then when the second one went off just shortly after, I just like really started panicking. And then there was a loading zone outside of my room. So there were people coming, you know, police officers opening up vans and rolling out machine guns. And I have never seen anything like that in my life. I've never, you know, I used to shoot biathlon rifle, but I've never touched a machine gun or seen guns like that. I've never seen protective gear. And so it just shot my anxiety through the roof. And I just, yeah, it was, I mean, it's crazy thinking back. My sister, my younger sister was trying to call us because she had been to Boston before to watch me race. And she said, you know, they're saying on Fox News that there's a bomb at the press conference. You have to get out of that hotel. And of course, we were on lockdown in the hotel. So there was all this misinformation, and it was really, really scary for me. And it was interesting how other, like, people reacted differently. You know, a lot of people were like angry. A lot of people like weren't that scared. They were upset. I definitely was emotional and scared and thinking big picture. Like my entire family, except for my younger sister, is here right now. And they all could be gone because I ran a race. You know, I was having a lot of these kinds of feelings and emotions, and it lasted a long time.
Have you been back to Boston since then?
I went back in 2014 to watch, and I was so emotional, but it was, you know, that was a great year where Meb won and Shalane ran so fast and really like pulled that field to unbelievable times. So I was really happy to be there that year. And but it was hard. Like when I went to the hotel and just started crying. And I think a lot of people had emotional experiences like that. You know, it was a scary time, and it was really sad. It was really sad that something so beautiful could end up that way.
If you were to come back and run with the pack, as it were, at some point, what do you think you would most look forward to about that?
I just love that course. I love the fans and the course, and I'm sure it'd be different than when you're leading the race. You know, the women go first, they're the first people you see, and the fans go crazy. But I think I actually really, really just love that course, and experiencing that community and that excitement without the pressure. It's something that I really would like to experience. And it's something that even as like a sub elite, I've thought about, because I really am not coached by anyone anymore, but my coach, Mark Wetmore, I think he would just love that race. So I have like toyed around with it numerous times with coming back and doing it at some sort of level. And I just want to do it again on my own terms, basically.
Well, I suspect that they'd find a way to get you in the race if you ever ask. Well, as good as some of those marathons were, and you've run some excellent ones, I might be most impressed with your performance at the Olympic Marathon Trials in 2016 in LA, in that heat. You finished 4th, so you just missed the team, but that was a tough day, a tough race, and I don't think anybody saw you coming at all.
Yeah, I mean, I had been injured for a couple years, and so it was fair. Like I wasn't invited to the press conference. I wasn't invited to, like, really included in a lot of the pre-media type stuff. But like I also had finally gotten myself healthy. I got healthy in the fall of 2015. And I mean, I had some pretty good training in 2014, and then I got a sacral stress fracture, and then I had to have a knee surgery. And then in 2015, I was starting to get kind of into shape, and then I got really derailed by just doping stuff, and really just like emotionally burnt out. And then I had like a hamstring flare, whatever, but I finally started to get into a routine, and I didn't know, you know, what kind of shape anyone else would be in, but I knew that I was hitting workouts that had gotten me on a team before. And so I just was really, you know, my original plan was to run with the lead pack no matter what. But then as the forecast started to come more into focus, we realized that people that ran hard no matter what were going to blow up. I mean, it was seriously horrible conditions. And so at that point, we really made this plan of 229 is going to make that team. Let's run 229 as evenly as possible. And 229 did make that team. I didn't run 229. I really faltered in the last 4 miles from an emotional standpoint, like I knew I wasn't going to make it, and I was kind of just willing myself to even finish. But my coaches were right. A deliberate 229 made the team.
Yeah, you really toughed it out those last few miles in that race.
Yeah, it was heavy. I loved training for that marathon so much. It brought so much joy into my life. It really reconnected me with why I loved running and what I loved about competition. And I just didn't want to finish because I knew it was over. As soon as I crossed that line, it was done. And I also knew that I wasn't probably going to go another 4 years at that level. So yeah, those last 3 miles were probably the toughest of my career.
How long did it take for you to appreciate them?
Oh, geez. I don't know. I'm getting teary-eyed just talking about it. I don't know. I mean, I appreciate the work I put in. I lost to 3 incredible women on that day. But it's probably always going to hurt. You know what I mean? To be so close to something. And everybody wants to just put a bow on their career. My thing was I'm fighting through all this stuff in the media and in my own personal life. And I'm going to make that Olympic team, and that's for me, and that'll be my bow, and I'm going to walk away and do something, keep running, but not train at this level anymore. And, it's tough when you don't get that, but I actually, realistically, nobody really gets that perfect bow at the end of their career. It's always usually ends not when we want or in the way that we want.
True.
Yeah.
Were you in Atlanta? You were in Atlanta, weren't you?
Yes. Which is something 4 years ago I couldn't imagine myself doing. It would be too painful, but instead I had the best time. Yeah.
Now, why did you have the best time?
I loved watching the women race. I've really switched over the last few years from, I've always been friends with my competitors, but from worrying about what they're doing to appreciating what they're doing, and that was hard for me. I couldn't always just watch people racing. I would feel jealous, and I would feel I wish I was there. I wish I was having this opportunity. But then really in the last couple of years, all that sort of went away, and I could just be truly a fan. And a lot of the women racing I competed against, they're still racing. And then there's a lot of fun new up and comers. And I feel I know a lot of them, whether it's interviewing them for my podcast or relationships. And so it was just super exciting, and it was fun to be on the other side. And also the size of the field was just amazing. And it just really was look how far women have come. So I had the best time cheering for everybody. And, I was really disappointed for a lot of people, but only 3 were going to make it. So I was going to feel that way no matter what. And yeah, it just was a great day, and it went well into the night, but it was really fun.
Well, that's good to hear.
Yeah, I think I ran into Desi in the hotel lobby at midnight, and then we went out for a couple more hours. So it just was
that sounds about right.
fun.
You mentioned Des again. When she finally won Boston, what were your first thoughts? What were you doing? Were you watching the race in some way?
In my home with my agent and my husband, and I felt a huge sense of relief because there were so many good American women that year that were entered, whether they made it to the start or not. I think Sarah Hall was entered, Jordan Hesse was entered, Shalane, Molly Huddle, Kellen Taylor. I mean, there was so many great American women, and I just had this feeling this is going to happen. This is what happens when you get everyone together and people are facing each other. You have 7 great women, your odds of American women winning, just get higher and higher. So I had a really good feeling leading into it. Then of course the weather was just atrocious, and it was just crazy. I mean, it was just insane. But I think when Desi did take the lead and no one was coming with her, I just felt I just wanted her to get there. I wanted to go up to my TV and hit fast forward and make it. Like, please just let this happen, you know, like this. And of course it's about her, but it's really about all of us. We just want this title for the US. And yeah, I was just super excited for her. And I felt a sense of relief. Like, even for myself, even though I knew I was probably beyond being able to get myself in shape to win that, it was still in the back of my mind, like, this needs to get done. You know, we need to check this box. Like, we need to win Boston. And so I was just relieved that it was done. And then I was really happy that she was the one that got it, because she has dedicated so much of her career to that marathon. So it was just an awesome experience. I was crying, Shannon was crying, Adam, we were all high-fiving and hugging and just super excited.
You mentioned your podcast. How does it, and you do that for the Clean Sport Collective, with an organization with which you're involved. Tell us a little bit more about that organization and how you got involved in it.
So I didn't start the Clean Sport Collective. It was started by actually my agent and a few other people who had witnessed all the public battles against doping and all of the public saying, what can we do to help? So they started the Clean Sport Collective as a chance for people to sign a pledge to support clean athletes, to compete, clean themselves, for brands to sign on and say, we won't sponsor athletes who are caught or have served bans. And so it was a way to sort of build this community that really cares about clean sport. I went to an anti-doping conference in London in April of 2019, and I kept hearing about the importance of the athlete voice, yet they never talked to any athletes at this conference. So I came back determined to, like, let's give the athlete a voice. And so at that point, I went on board and actually became a board member of the Clean Sport Collective, and then started the podcast, and really with the goal of letting clean athletes have a chance to tell their stories and have a chance to tell why they've made the choices they've made, and to help us realize, like, what some of those losses are. So that's how that all came to be.
What do you feel some of those losses are?
I mean, the easy ones are financial, right? You know, Joe Pavey wins a bronze medal 13 years later. Well, so what? All the financial gain from that is gone. But it really, mostly, it's about the moments. I mean, standing on the podium, it would have changed the trajectory of her career. She would have been able to get into any meet she wanted. She certainly would have been dropped by her sponsor after that. But it's that moment. I mean, that's like, you train your whole life for like one or two moments like that, or the opportunity to have a moment like that. And, you know, it's frustrating talking to these athletes, but it's good to let them talk too. You know, like for myself, all these years later, I don't really even know how good I was. You know, like the US Olympic Committee called me last year to let me know I was officially 8th in the 5,000 in Beijing, because someone was officially or two people had been taken out, or I don't remember. Anyway, but if you look at the list of the women that finished in front of me, many of them were caught up in a doping scandal at some point or another. So I think for us athletes, it's like we dedicate our whole lives to this, and I'm okay. I think everyone's okay not being the best, but we just want to know how good we are. And it's that never knowing. Like, I'll never really know how good I was. And that's really hard to swallow. And yeah, it's just tough. So you really have to come at it from a place of just loving the sport, because you can't control what anyone else is going to do.
How did that World Championship medal change your life?
It changed my life dramatically. Before that race, I couldn't get into a race unless my husband was running. He was a bigger name. And so if he wasn't racing at a meet, I couldn't get in. I was always in like the slower wave. If I did get into a race, I had a hard time getting into meets. I never got an appearance fee. I had a very small contract. I never won any prize money because it was hard for me to even get into a race. After that, literally overnight, I started getting appearance fees. I could go to any race. I was a 10K runner. I could run a half marathon. I could run a 1,500 meter, like anything that I wanted. It opened up so many doors for me and so much opportunity. And it really changed my career. I went from something I was doing and loving, but not knowing if I should really be pursuing this much longer, to something that has become a lifelong career. And that's what's really sad, is someone like Joe Pavey didn't have that. Third place, I can't remember who the woman is that finished behind Shalane in Beijing, didn't have that. Alicia Montano didn't have that. And that's, for me, that's unacceptable because I did get that gain and I know how much it profoundly changed the trajectory of my life. And they should have that as well.
Well, now that you are co-hosting a podcast and you have a chance to ask the questions instead of be on the other end of the interview, what is that like for you?
Yeah, it's fine. I mean, I really just want to hear their voices, and if we have a tough question, usually my co-host asks the tough questions. We have interviewed a couple people who did dope. We interviewed Floyd Landis and Tyler Hamilton. And those are tough.
Well, why did you interview two guys who did dope?
So this has been controversial for us, but I feel like if we never talk to people who took the wrong path, we can't learn what made them make those choices. And, it's one thing for me to say to my son, I never did it, your dad never did it, don't do it, don't do it. But I want to know Tyler Hamilton's parents, they weren't Olympic athletes, but they were like, don't ever cheat. And yet he did. So what happened there? What was the turning point? And, for him, I think a lot of it was being away from his parents at a young age, being over in Europe, everyone around him is doing it. And it's sort of just like this slow grind until it just becomes normalized. Well, we need to learn how to stop that. That cannot be the acceptable way. There needs to be someone who's saying, you actually don't have to do that, But I think it's important to talk to the people who have made the wrong choice, because I think it's more, we definitely want to highlight the people who have made the right choice more, but we can learn so much from the people who took the wrong path. I used to be very, very black and white. You're like a good person and you're clean, or you're a bad person and you cheated. And I don't feel so strongly about that anymore. I think that very good people make very horrible choices. And I think part of the goodness shows when they're willing to talk about that and help us learn from it so that other people don't make those same choices.
Do you feel that the sport is on the upside now, headed in the right direction?
I don't know. I have good days and bad days. I think COVID has not been good for the anti-doping front because a lot of doping control was shut down, understandably. But what does that mean? There's always people wanting to cheat. Now they know you're not coming to test. So I'm nervous about the Tokyo Games for clean athletes. I'm nervous for what they're going to face there. But I do also have hope because I feel like more and more athletes are speaking out. More and more athletes are taking a stand. I think we saw at the World Championships in Doha, many athletes taking their interview time to discuss doping in the sport, which we never would have seen that even 4 years ago. So I do feel like we're starting to see a culture shift, and so that does give me hope.
Was there ever a point in your career where you fell out of love with running?
Yes, definitely. I think after Boston 09 was one of those periods where it felt like it was out of my control anymore. It was so much bigger than I'm running, and the expectations were just so high. And I was coming off of, the two best years of my life. I was 30 or 31, the prime of my career. I had won the medal. I had made an Olympic team. I had run so well in New York, around Boston, but it started to feel like it was bigger than me. It was like just getting out of hand, and the expectation was so high, and I started to resent being good at it, because running is something that has always been there for me. Like whether I'm racing well or not, it's been there for me. Like when my mom got divorced, it really got me through stuff. Just all these periods of my life that were difficult, running was what got me through it. And so I definitely have had periods like that in 09. And again, I would say 2017, 2018, when I was still trying to recreate, still trying to prove that I was good and that I could have made the team in 2016, and trying to do workouts that I did in my 30s and late 20s when I was now 40, and trying to push this thing, and finally I just had to say, I hate running right now. I hate training. I hate everything about it. All it does is make me sad and feel bad about myself. So I'm either going to just be done with it, or I need to do it on my terms and where I'm at right now, and let go of all this expectation and let go of all these things that I used to do, and accept that I'm not that same person anymore. But that was hard. That was like a 2-year struggle to get to a place where, yeah, I could embrace it for what it is. But yeah, I mean, running at times in my career, it got out of my hands, I feel like, and became more of a job than a passion.
Are you back in love with it?
Oh yeah. Yeah, yeah, totally. It's crazy now. It's like I run like 50, 60, 70 miles a week, and like I don't know, like today my son is at a friend, so I'm going to do a double even though I'm not even training for anything, but I run for the enjoyment of it now. And I do like to plan and try to challenge myself and do stuff like the 50K and perhaps some races next year. But even if there was never a race on the calendar, I would probably still just run every day because I love it now. I love the way it makes me feel. I feel more centered, more focused, more ready to face the day. I feel less anxiety and stress. And it really has been like the greatest gift that I was ever given was my grandpa getting me to go for a run.
How old were you when Grandpa got you to go for a run?
He took me to a 1 mile race when I was 6 years old. And he's the one that got me into running. And he was a lifelong runner. He's actually still with us, but he's not really with us. He's not really there mentally anymore, but he loved running and he never raced. It was all about how it felt. And when he was stressed, he would run. And so he's the one that got me into it. He would take me to races once or twice a year in the summertime. When I would be out at his house on the lake, he'd have me run with him up and down the road a couple times. And really, like, he's the one who introduced the sport into my life because my family was much more team sport oriented. And he's really the one that brought it into my life. And I'm like, just so grateful.
How fun. So what do you think is next for you as a runner?
I don't know. Like I actually this year was thinking about doing a 50 miler and then totally switched gears and decided to run Fifth Avenue Mile and see if I could break 5 minutes and perhaps even like scare the Masters record. But then with COVID, everything went, out the door. And my training, I stayed home with my son when he went to online learning. And so I couldn't train the way I needed to train. And then running really just became like this stress relief for me during this time. So there's no way I could run sub 5 minutes in the mile, just so everyone knows. It's not going to happen.
Just for the record.
I still think of things like that, like a challenge for me, like could I next year get in sub 5 minute shape? Could I next year run a 50 miler? Could I run a stage race like Trans Rockies? So that's the kind of stuff. I told Adam my dream situation is that I have 1 or 2 goals a year in running that are just for me, but I'm still supported by running companies, which is like the funniest thing of it all. It's like amazing. So I still get to like run and train and help develop product, clothing and shoes. And I really get to be around the industry, even though I'm admittedly never going to make another team. It's just not going to happen.
Is that what made you fall back in love with running? That you're doing it now just for you?
I think so. I went through this period of like, I don't know that I can train the way I need to train or if my body can handle it anymore. And, I went to the companies I work with and I was like, I don't know if I'll ever race again. And there was a lot of anxiety behind those conversations. And when they just like embraced me back and they were like, just share your journey. Like you have value whether or not you race. It was such a release and such a relief of like, okay, I can just run what's good for me, and I don't have to be trying to do something all the time or trying to prove something all the time. So it's really just, I feel like I'm the luckiest person in the world because I just like run and design stuff and get to work with cool companies and that's it, and there's no like, you have to be ranked here, you have to do this, you have to make, there's none of that. So I feel really, really lucky. And again, none of this would have happened without getting in training, but none of it would have happened without that medal. And so all of these other things, they just changed my life so much.
You've shifted a lot of emotional gears in your career. And the runners who will be doing the virtual Boston Marathon are shifting an emotional gear right now, that they're going to be doing Boston, but it's not how they had expected to do it. What sort of advice would you give them on sort of putting their heads around that and trying to embrace that?
Yeah, I think, rarely does something go exactly how you're expecting. And I think as runners, typically we're pretty adaptable because we know that, because we get dehydrated or our Achilles is sore, or, the workout's not going right, or it's really windy, or whatever it is, we know how to sort of adapt. This is a bigger adaptation and more of a challenge. We all miss being on a start line. We miss running with packs of people. We miss that excitement of going to the expo and getting towards race day and that countdown towards race day. But there's so much to be gained from a virtual experience, and there's so much to be gained and strengthen yourself to get out and do something like that where you don't have all of the excitement built around it. It really is finding the strength and power in yourself to get out there and accomplish it. So I would say, think of it as this is just making you so much stronger. And when you finally do get in a race where there's people everywhere, it's going to feel so easy and amazing.
I think that's probably a great place to leave this off.
Okay.
Tara, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And I hope we see you back on the Boston course one of these years really soon, enjoying every mile of it.
I will. I'll be back, I promise.
Great. Thanks.
Thank you.